We all must search. We must search for what is truth.
What is truth?
Truth is
just that's a really hard question. What is truth?
There has to be a fixed truth, in my opinion, for the universe to function properly.
What is truth?
And the lonely voice of youth cries, what is truth?
And the truth shall set you free!
Hello and welcome to What is Truth? I am your host, Dave Glander. It is a cold Sunday morning down here in the South. I don't know where you're at, but I hope it's warmer than we are. Maybe that would be Hawaii or something like that. I'm really excited about today's show. Last week we started what I'm calling kind of the X-Files of Christianity, and we talked about the suppression of truth, and we had on Dr. Bergman and Dr. Judkins, and Dr. Bergman had written a book that was really detailing the amount of scientists who have either lost their jobs or have been blacklisted one way or the other, whether it's lost their jobs, get a demotion, pay cuts, not have their work published. There's a giant conspiracy out there to try and hide the truth about certain things. We were really talking about intelligent design as an area of study last week, and this week we're going to actually break into one of my favorite topics. It's a question that I get more often than not from young atheists, kids, but it's also a question that adults have asked 100 times over again. And here's the question. Well, if the Bible's true, what about dinosaurs? And my response is, well, since the Bible doesn't necessarily talk about dinosaurs, which we can actually debate that, and I'm sure that's going to come up here in just a little bit. It actually does have a mention of it. While it doesn't go into great detail about it, does that mean that because it's omissed from the scriptures that they didn't exist, and that the Bible's trying to deny their existence? Not at all. Not at all in any way, shape, or fashion. And so that's my first area. And then I always look at the people and I say, have you actually studied the evidence of dinosaurs' existence along with mankind? And so that's what we're going to be talking about today on the show. I have got a good friend of mine who is Dr. Judkins. He's the author. He's an author, explorer, and a biblical archaeologist from Dallas, Texas. He has a passion for searching for the truth and mysteries of the past, which he airs on his internet show, Man vs. Archaeology. He's studied the human fossil footprint phenomena for over 15 years. He's credited with mapping the longest contiguous dinosaur trackway in the Western Hemisphere near Glen Rose, Texas, in the year 2000. He's participated in numerous excavations throughout the U.S. and Israel, ranging from 15 different dinosaur digs, the Pool of Siloam in 2004, and Jerusalem and the Tower of Siloam in 2008. He's been featured on TBN's Creation in the 21st Century, and his PhD is in biblical archaeology. Dr. Judkins, thank you for coming on the show today.
Hello, Dave. It's a pleasure to be on with you again. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited about today's show. Just for the record, I'm going to call you Aaron from here on out, but it is Dr. Judkins, and I think that's respectable. But at the same time, my mom always told me down here in the South, everybody says ma'am and sir, and I said, well, up north, it's not necessarily rude, but it's not a common custom to have people called ma'am and sir. It's almost disrespectful in certain circles, and people down here look at me and go, what do you mean? And I said, well, my mom always said this. Moms go through an awful lot of work to come up with a name for a child. I mean, that's a big thing. You got to name somebody something they're going to have for the rest of their life. Call them by their name to honor their mother. And so in honor of my mother, I have always called people by their first name. So Aaron, thank you again for coming on the show. Aaron,
you're welcome.
Let's
have it any other way.
I'm just ecstatic about this particular subject because it's such an often brought up controversy, if you will, over let's address this real quick. If dinosaurs did live beside man, what would that do to the theory of evolution? What would that do to secular science? Because I think before we go into certain evidences, I think we really need to address the concern that secular science has for this particular subject. And Aaron, what do you think, in your opinion, is the real motive behind trying to suppress any truth that we might talk about tonight?
Well, Dave, the motive is to question the authenticity of God's Word, the Bible. That's the motive, because evolutionary concepts, the evolutionary paradigm cannot explain supernatural life origins. And so they really question all the life origins of mankind in the universe. And so that goes right along with what happened to the dinosaurs. Matter of fact, the evolutionists have kind of hijacked the dinosaurs when really the creation had talked about dinosaurs way in the beginning. In Job chapter 40 and in Genesis, we see that God created all the animals on day number 6 along with man. He even tells Job in Job chapter 40, behold now behemoth, which I made with thee. He's saying, Job, I created this magnificent creature. He calls him the chief of the ways of God. It's kind of like saying the lion is the king of the jungle now. And he's saying, look at this creature. He's the chief of the ways of God. He's got a tail like a cedar tree, and he drinks up the water Jordan. And he gives this vivid description in Job chapter 40 about behemoth. Now, if you look in the commentaries, the commentators say, well, this is probably a hippo or an elephant.
That's very funny
which is funny because
the
none of
tail.
the commentators haven't seen an elephant's tail or a hippo's tail recently, I don't believe. So this is really what God is saying to Job is he's saying, this is a creature which I made with thee. He is one of my most majestic creatures. This fits the description of a sauropod type of dinosaur. And so the Bible does talk about dinosaurs, but it doesn't say the word dinosaur. It says the word dragons. In Isaiah and other places in the Bible, it terms them as dragons. And, of course, God specifically says behemoth, which is a particular name for this creature. And then in Job chapter 41, he goes on and describes the Leviathan, the water-breathing dragon.
Yes.
That he explains to Job. So dinosaurs are mentioned in the Bible. Matter of fact, Dave, I've been on set today with the guys from Restoring Genesis Ministries, and they just started a shoot on location here in Glen Rose, Texas, a new documentary called Forbidden History Part 2, Footprints in Stone. And we started that shoot yesterday and today. It'll go on. And matter of fact, they just did a great documentary on this, Dave. It's called Forbidden History, Dinosaurs in the Bible.
Wow.
And they did a great job on this video. As a matter of fact, people can go on to their website at forbidden-history.com to pull that up. It's called The Forbidden History of Dinosaurs. Or you can go to my website, which is www.aaronjudkins.com, AARONJUDKINS.com, aaronjudkins.com. And so I've been out with these guys. They're excited, and they are basically reshooting the documentary Footprints in Stone from 1969, but it's the updated version,
Nice.
Forbidden History Part 2. And so I'm glad to be working with these guys.
Absolutely, that's exciting, and I think the real what's sticking out in what you're saying for me right now is that they're calling it the Forbidden History, and that's what I really want our listeners right now to lock into is this topic is one that is known about in the science circles, but it's often once again blacklisted from topics. You're really not allowed to talk about that. If you didn't listen to last week's show, I'll have that up on the website, and I can give you information about how to listen to that, where we covered some of the suppression of the truth. So let's do this. Let's get right into what you guys were looking at. Now, I'm assuming you went down to the Paluxy.
Oh yeah, we
to
shot
do the
on
shoot.
location.
Okay, and what was it? Let's go ahead and start right into the evidences. I'm going to give out the phone number to the show so that as we're talking, if you have any questions, comments, whether they're good or bad, this is one of those topics that I don't think any of us are trying to be dogmatic about our approach. We're all seekers of the truth. And so if you have a question or a comment that is in line with this topic, whether you think we're going to like it or not, I would ask you to call in so we can discuss it so that together we can get to the bottom of it. The phone number is 678-963-5482. Once again, that's 678-963-5482. If you're not a big fan of putting your voice over the radio, then what you can do is just go to Facebook and go to What is Truth Radio Show with Dave Glander. That's What is Truth Radio Show with Dave Glander. Get on there, and right on our page, just hit the like button, and then go ahead, right on the page, you can submit your question or your comment right there, and Shannon McDaniel is sitting on the other end of a pair of headphones in front of a computer just waiting to receive your questions right there. So you can either get online on Facebook, whatistruthradio.com, What is Truth Radio with Dave Glander on Facebook, or you can dial 678-963-5482. We're opening the lines at any point in time during this entire interview. So go ahead and tell us, what was it that you were looking at down at the Paluxy?
Well, down on the Paluxy is famous for its dinosaur footprints, but adjacent to fossil human footprints. Now, these human fossil footprints are supposedly found in ancient rock, and evolution says that man didn't evolve until about the late Tertiary, so they cannot be more than, say, 1 to 3 million years old. But human footprints have been found in this Cretaceous rock strata that is supposedly 120 million years old. Now, there's a problem here, Dave, because this evidence clearly shows that these footprints were made in the rocks while the rock was yet soft mud. So either modern man either lived at the very earliest evolutionary era of prehistory, which they won't say because they can't push man back millions and millions of years of time.
Sure.
Or all the rock dating must be shrunk down to a much shorter time frame, during all of which man lived.
All right.
So there's a big conundrum here because the evolutionary paradigm does not hold to man and dinosaur living contemporaneously, but the Bible account does, and that view has not changed.
So let me understand clearly what you're saying is that in the same strata, in the same place that the dinosaur footprints are found, and what kind of dinosaurs are most common as far as what they're believed to be, as far as the footprints are?
Well, down in the Glen Rose area, there are 3 types of dinosaurs. There's the theropod Acrocanthosaurus dinosaur, which means high-spined lizard.
Okay.
Then there's the big sauropod footprints from Paluxysaurus.
Okay.
And then there's ornithopod footprints as well.
Okay. And so what you're saying is there's 3 different types of footprints found in that area, found in the same layer, if you will. And next to those footprints are what's believed to be human footprints.
That's right.
Okay, let me go ahead and address something that somebody had brought up. They thought we were going to get into this subject last week, and they brought up the question that at the end of, I believe it was you should probably know exactly what I'm talking about. At the end of World War II, there was a gentleman who was making quite a bit of profit off of supposedly getting the human footprints from the riverbed and then selling them for high dollar. And I think it was sometime right before he died, he finally admitted that he had actually made those. He had fabricated those footprints. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Well,
what was the gentleman's name?
Back in the 1930s, it's a well-known fact that a man by the name of George Adams fabricated no more than 3 carved footprints. Now, you have to understand that back in the 30s, people were desperate to put food on their table. And people were going down out of the fields after they had worked all day in the fields. They would go down, and before it was against the law to do so, they would take manpower, they would take equipment, and they would cut dinosaur tracks out of the river. Okay. And then they would have to haul them back up, and then they would sell them to tourists. Now, back then they were lucky to get, $2.40 a day, to get people to go down there and help them dig it out and make that, that wasn't very much money, but to them it was something. And so they were really trying to do anything they could to put bread on the table. Okay. George Adams carved a few human footprints. We know because he showed them to his family, and they were sold to some passing tourists to make money during this Depression. One of the human footprints that he did was pretty good, and the Smithsonian caught word of it and asked to see it, but he actually didn't want to show that because he didn't do it for that. He basically, just basically buried it in the backyard so no one would see it because he didn't want anything like that going out.
Sure.
Back then, people didn't have time to go down and carve tracks in a riverbed. That wasn't people's intent. People's intent was to eat.
Yeah.
And but George Adams did this, and his family basically back just a few years ago, a major discovery was found in that they found one of the carved footprints that he had carved back in the 30s and back at the old homestead, and they actually let us study it. They brought it to the museum, the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, and we got to study it, and we actually have a copy of that on display.
Okay. You have a copy of a copy.
We have a copy of it because the original was in the hands of the family.
Uh-huh.
But what they did was allow us to study it, and here's what it showed. It shows the difference between an authentic human fossil footprint and a faked carved footprint.
Okay, so before we go into that, I want to make this clear. Nobody on the side of trying to prove that these are human footprints is denying that there had been fabricated footprints by Mr. Adams. Has there been anybody other than Mr. Adams who fabricated footprints, tried to make forgeries of the footprints, even maybe to go as far as to try and prove that they're down there, that the footprints are down there? Is this controversy bigger than Mr. Adams?
Well, the controversy does get extended because here's the opponents of the human footprints. They just take this one account of Mr. Adams carving no more than 3 human footprints as described by his family,
uh-huh,
who witnessed him doing that. But they want to say that all of the footprints are carved, and that's simply not the case. They just throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
This is really the only known account of carved footprints that we know of that's documented. But this shows clearly that this footprint was carved. It's static. It has no motion to it. There's no arch to it. There's no compression density in the rock mud.
Okay, let's take this very slowly because I remember you giving me this description of how you can actually test a real footprint from a forgery, and that's where I want to go next with that. Is first, there's no denial that a controversy occurred. Correct. I mean, nobody's trying to say, wash it under the rug. No, nothing like that happened.
Right.
Nobody's denying that. And actually, what's happened is because you have found and had access to testing on the carved footprint. I guess you could test any carved footprint if you took a soft clay, carved or imprinted a footprint or something like that, dried it out. I guess you could run this same test on it that you're about to tell us about. Well,
I mean, there's different ways to authenticate a real footprint. One is it in a trail. There has to be 3 established tracks to establish a trail. Now, if it's isolated, then what you have is you have to have 3 distinguishing characteristics to determine if it's a authentic human footprint. So if you're looking at it in situ, then the footprint has to show a great toe, a secondary toe, any of the toes, the base of the phalanges, the longitudinal side of the medial or the medial arch, the calcaneus heel section, the transverse arch. Any of those characteristics would be comparable to authenticating a human footprint, but it has to be at least 3 of them. You can't just point out one feature and say that's a human footprint.
Okay.
There has to be at least 3 features to characterize a track authentic.
Okay.
So if it has a great toe and a second toe and a longitudinal arch, then that would be enough to say that's an authentic track. Now, who or what made the track is a wholly different story, but that's the same technique that Mary Leakey used on the Tanzania tracks in Lake Tole, incidentally, who she wanted to authenticate the tracks so she had Dr. Louise Robbins from North Carolina, who was a foremost expert in footprint forensics at the time. And when Dr. Robbins came down to Tanzania and to look at the Laetoli trackway, his conclusion was specifically that they were no different than modern human tracks. Now, she didn't like that answer, and she put him on a plane back home.
Oh, geez.
Because she was looking for a missing link.
Yeah.
Between the apes who had walked in a quadrupedal form to a hominid who had walked bipedally for the first time, which they claimed was Australopithecus afarensis, or what we know as Lucy.
Yeah.
But Dr.
Which is
Louise
a subject
Robbins,
for a whole nother show that we'll have to have you back on for.
Oh, well, Dr. Louise Robbins was very clear that they were human. So it's the standard that you use, and you have to set your terms and your definitions so everyone's on the same page. And so the standard is that you have to use, any one of those qualifications to qualify it as authentic.
Sure. So let's simplify this for our listeners. If it's a carved footprint that somebody's trying to forge, it's not going. If you put it through, is it an X-ray process? How do you determine the compaction rating?
Well, what you do, it could be a footprint, it could be natural formation, it could be carved or fake, or it could be an animal footprint. Mm-hmm. And so what you do is you have to, authenticate it. But one of the ways that you can do it for authentication for basically, did the person or animal, like a dinosaur, step into this mud? Now, if you have the capability of having the rock with the footprint in it, then what you can do is you can run it under spiral CT scan.
Okay.
Now, the spiral CT scan will show if there is any compression density factors within the limestone rock.
Okay.
In other words, does it have load-bearing structures underneath? And what we find is in authentic footprints that when that limey mud was soft, when the person stepped down and compressed that mud, it compressed the calcite inclusions in the lime, and it shows the compression density when you run it under spiral CT CAT scan. But on a fate carved print like the one we was able to study from the late George Adams, it shows none of the motion features in a person who actually stepped in mud. No mud up push, none of the other features I talked about. It shows stasis.
So what
and
this
it doesn't show any load bearing compression density in the spiral CT, which is the clear defining way of authenticating it. Is simply just it's carved. There's no load bearing structures.
So what this sounds like to me is no matter where you could let's just say a footprint. That you've got a cut rock that somebody's quote unquote cut out of a rock, and in the middle of this rock there's a footprint in the middle of this rock. And what you're telling me is there is a good testable, observable, and credible scientific method to actually determine whether or not that is a forgery or whether or not that's an actual footprint. That's what I'm hearing.
That's correct, and that's why we show people both. We show people the authentic tracks, and then we show people the fate carved track, because there's a clear difference. Visibly, there's a clear difference. And in the spiral CT CAT scans, there's a very clear difference.
So what's to stop me from going out and grabbing some Georgia red clay, getting it wet, and sticking my foot down in it, and setting it out in the sun, baking that thing, and bringing it over to you and saying, "Aaron, look what I've got. I just cut this out of a riverbed that dried." I mean, we were in a drought, it was about 5 years ago or something, that dried up every river and lake around here. I mean, it was a terrible drought. Let's just say, somebody took advantage of that time and said, "Hey, Aaron, while this was down, I did it." How would you be able to separate the modern footprint, if you will, versus one that is, let's say, several thousand years old? I mean, how would you know it wasn't? Sure, it's past the spiral CT, and it is a compression of somebody. But how will we know that it's not 30-day-old compression versus a 3,000-year-old.
You know, ideally, you need to look at it in situ, which means in place, in context. Barring that, if someone just brought something up to me, you have to look at, you know, what rock layer it's in.
Yeah.
You know, if this is clay, then it's not going to pass. You know, it's not going to pass the test because it shows, you know, modern time frame. If it's in rock, now that's a different story because rock is supposedly, according to the, you know, geological time scale that the evolutionary community uses, you know, they base it off of eons of times and millions of years.
Okay.
And depending on what rock layer that's in, depends on, you know, if that's supposedly modern or if that's supposedly an ancient rock. So that's the key, because the footprints in Glen Rose are in Cretaceous rock. They're not in clay or anything that's, you know, of modern material. These are embedded in rock in the same layer of the dinosaurs, which goes back to approximately 120 million years old, so they tell us.
Yeah.
But there's a big problem with that because they cannot push man back that far, and they can't revise the dating techniques to bring everything up to recent age, so they just totally deny that man and dinosaur coexisted. Matter of fact, they said they were separated by 60 million years. So I would look at the rock layer to determine, you know, what exactly is this footprint in. That's what you have to look at. You have to ask the basic questions first. Somebody
like yourself, an archaeologist familiar with geology, you would be able to tell the difference between a brand new footprint that has a compression factors in there, but it was a brand new one versus something that was several thousand years old. I mean, there's good, clear, observable science to tell the difference between those two. What I'm trying to establish is there's good, clear, credible ways, scientific methods to test the hypothesis of whether or not that's a human footprint that is actually made at the exact same time as when the dinosaurs. We're not talking about whether that was 120 million years ago or 3,000 years ago. I'm not talking about time frame at this point, but just that they were actually done at the exact same time. There's clear, observable, repeatable scientific methods that are in place that somebody can run these through and verify their authenticity.
That's right, and that's part of the work that I've done over the last, 15 to 17 years. As researching this paleoichnology branch of field, is the study of fossil trace footprints. And that's what led me down this path of, for myself, are these fossil footprints in rock real? Because I didn't know about it either. It totally blew my mind, and I had never heard this or seen it anywhere. And now I knew about Laetoli, but I didn't know how to reconcile the evolutionary concepts with the Bible at the time. And so this was all brand new information for me, and it led me on a journey to discover for myself the truth behind it.
All right. So here's where I feel like we're at. We've come to the conclusion that there were forgeries. Nobody's trying to wash those under the rug. They're admitting to the forgeries. And really the real story behind the forgeries is the guy wasn't really trying to pass it off as a footprint. Otherwise, he would have let the Smithsonian do testing on it. He was simply trying to make a few bucks off some traveling tourists. These footprints have actually been tested through spiral CT scans alongside the actual footprints that came out of the Paluxy and Glen Rose. And the ones that have, the two of them been tested, one shows to be authentic human footprints alongside dinosaur footprints. The other one showed unanimously across the board with the scientists that it was a forgery. And so what we have is what I'm hearing. And please let me present this as openly and candidly as possible for our listeners, and then I would highly suggest continue to do the research and understand, as we talked about last week, not all truth, not everything that you read is true, not everything that you are seeing is all that there is. There's a lot more information out there than what most people are given on a daily basis. So just to recap, we have established that there are human footprints in the same layer as the dinosaur footprints.
That's right. And, people ask me all the time, Dave, about the Paluxy evidence, and they don't believe it, and some do, and that's okay. I'm not trying to convince anyone of the Paluxy evidence. I know, for me, I'm convinced because I studied it.
Yes.
I've seen the footprints for my own two eyes. I've excavated them under 12 to 14 inches of limestone and the layers between the rock. You cannot forge or fake or carve those footprints. They are embedded in the rock, and it takes a lot of work to excavate those limestone layers.
Yeah.
But it's done with precision technique and with cameras rolling and with photographic evidence and with multiple witnesses, even with Nova filming and the local media. These have been excavated in the presence of witnesses, and you just cannot carve these tracks under these multiple layers of rock. It's just impossible. So that clearly shows authenticity, that these tracks are not carved because they're found, and they're continuing to be found under the layers of rock. But they're not isolated to Glen Rose.
I was just, before you go into that, because that's where I was about to go, let me give out that phone number again, 678-963-5482, 678-963-5482. I would have a real hard time believing that everybody listening right now has zero questions about this particular subject. So if you have a question about it, 678-963-5482, or get onto Facebook at What is Truth Radio with Dave Glander, and just hit the like button and go ahead and ask your question right there. We've got it up on the screen. Let's talk about that now. This is not an isolated incident. As a matter of fact, your doctrinal research, you started into your doctrinal research, let me rephrase that, was actually documenting the global phenomena of the human footprint fossil record, correct?
Well, it's part of my master's research that I started. My doctoral research was in archaeology, but I started this process out independently, just for my own inquisitive mind. I didn't understand what these were, never heard about it, and it totally blew me away. And I wanted to dig in more about it, so I began to study and collect notes and do a bunch of research and interviewed the old timers. And the more I studied this, and the excavations that I went on, I began to see that what I had been taught was not correct, and I couldn't understand why I had never heard this, even in my church or my Sunday school class. I didn't even know how to answer where did dinosaurs come from.
Wow.
It just wasn't there, and there was a lot of missing information for me. And so this whole area of creation science and biblical science really began to open up for me in this field, and I began to, in my research, realize that this was not an isolated event in Glen Rose, Texas, along the banks of the Paluxy River. This was really turning out to be a global phenomenon. And I wrote my book, Evolution in Human Fossil Footprints, that was published by Bible Believers. Was published by.
I hate when I do that. I do that.
Sorry.
I do that more often than not, to be honest. I'd like to say it's old age, but at
Bible
37,
Belt Publishing is
Bible
Belt Publishing is what I'm trying to say, and they published my book, Evolution in Human Fossil Footprints.
Well, because we only have just a little over 20 minutes left in the show, let's go ahead and move straight into kind of a, man, we can almost turn this into three parts. We'll have Joe Taylor on next week, and he is also an expert on this topic, and may have to have you back on as well next week to help touch on some of these things that we may not be able to cover this week. But what I want to do is quickly take us through. Let's pick three different regions in the world that you know of evidence of human footprints alongside dinosaur footprints that have been scientifically tested, and whether, and I know that some of them have controversies attached to them, not controversies as far as forgeries, controversies as far as evidence being buried, if you want to try and kind of touch on that just a little bit as you're making your way through. But go ahead and walk us through just a few sites that this is going on.
Well, specifically, Turkmenistan, which is called the Russian Paluxy. There's been reports since the 1980s that human fossil footprints have been found along the dinosaur tracks. There was a Russian geophysicist, which basically in 1996 edition of Creation magazine reported that there were these fossil footprints of dinosaurs and humans together, and supposedly it went back to the Jurassic era, which is some 200 million years ago. Matter of fact, it's covered by more than 3,000 footprints of dinosaurs. But when they were out there researching, this geophysicist was surprised, and he was just mystified that he came across footprints of bare human feet.
Is this photograph documented?
Yeah, the Moscow News in 1983 ran a version on this in their news, and of course, these scientists led more expeditions to the plateau, and they confirmed and found these dinosaur footprints and human footprints alongside each other. And as far as recent research, one of our colleagues, Dr. Dennis Swift, has done lots of research in that area and has photographed these footprints.
Okay, what about another region of the world that this is the case?
Well, there's other fossil footprints around the world. Now, they're not necessarily associated with dinosaur tracks, but some of the great ones.
And I don't even think that matters if they've been found in this. I'm not a geologist, but from my understanding, a layer is a layer across the globe. Yeah, I mean, like when you get down to a certain layer, that layer is consistent across the globe, or at least through major regions of continents. Is that? Am I
right?
Trying to dig out my Andrew Snelling geological classes as we were riding through the Grand Canyon, and they're a little bit foggy, but that's kind of the way that I understood that. So if you find footprints at a certain level, whether there's dinosaur footprints next to it or not, it's still the same quote-unquote the same portion of the geologic column, yeah?
Well, that's true. Like this limestone layer, in Glenrose, runs all the way around the world. You can find it at the White Cliffs of Dover in England, all the way through the eastern seaboard, around the Middle East, through Australia and back up. It's all over the world. But, some of the other great sites, Australia has a great site. Back in 2003, they found an area that had some 700 fossil human footprints in it. And these tracks were some 20 meters long, which is incredibly long. They go back to what they say is, 200,000 years, but these tracks are not 200,000 years. You have to understand, when they give you an age for rock, they don't use it as far as carbon-14 testing. They can't test it in those ways. They have to test it using special light testing. They test the grains of sand in the rock, and they come up with an estimated age. And so that's part of the information I give in the book. When they're talking about Australopithecus afarensis or 200,000 years of dating, I give you all the information, so when you're reading those accounts, you can understand of how they got that information and what it means. Yeah. And how it contradicts the creation model specifically. British Columbia has another great area of study. Matter of fact, they've narrowed this down to about 8,000 years old in the Mesolithic, and these are a large number of human footprint trackways that are just incredibly detailed, and it goes on and on. They, matter of fact, in Newport and Formby Point there in British Columbia, Italy, Nicaragua are some of my favorite footprints there at Acuhulinica, which is an area back in 1874 that Earl Flint discovered, and he found these footprints. Some of them was one was over 17 inches in length, and he found these footprints in at least 11 layers of overburden that was over these footprints.
My goodness. What is I know, I remember over at the museum you had a shoe, like a Nike shoe, from somebody, a basketball player or something, and you were explaining to us that it's not uncommon even nowadays to have this ginormous foot, a foot that fits into this shoe you had. I remember that shoe looked like it was 2 feet long. I mean, that thing was ginormous. And he said that was an actual shoe that came from a gentleman playing sports, something like that backs up. Because I remember at one point I read in one of the websites when I was doing research on this years ago, I remember reading, well, the footprints are too big. It's got to be from something else. And I actually heard that it was from some bipedal dinosaur that actually slid when it stepped. That's what made it look like it was so long. And what you're saying is no, that was a footprint of some sort of a human, not some sort of a human, but a human with some sort of enormous foot, which isn't all that impossible today. And that's why you had the shoe in the museum. I thought that was really, really interesting.
It's within anatomical ability in modern day times for people to have, feet that big.
Well, what is it? Let's go ahead and clarify this. What is it then? If and I'm not asking your opinion. I'm saying in the school of secular science, what do these footprints represent to them? If it's not evidence that maybe their geologic columns off, or that their time frames off, what are they doing to explain this?
Well, they don't explain it. They basically discount it altogether. Matter of fact,
but wait a second. How can you just that's why I've been very clear to ask you in such ways to say, is this verifiable, observable? Is there photo evidence of this? Is it documented? And you've answered yes on every occasion. And so how do they go a little, just a slight bit deeper to help me understand? How do they deny it? I mean, with any denial, you have to have some sort of a backup story to be able to deny something. What is the story?
Well, the story is, Dave, it all gets down to dating, because, the ones here on the Paluxy River, for instance, they just discount it altogether. They deny it, and that, that there's fossil human footprints on the Paluxy. That's fine, but what about the fossil human footprints in Mexico?
Yeah.
And so, they got other human footprint sites like Litoli, Africa, that they recognize as fossil human footprints, but they reclassify it and they redefine the terms, and they do it by redating. So when Mary Leakey was looking, to have Dr. Louis Robbins authenticate those footprints as belonging to a hominid, he could not. He said they were no different than modern anatomically human feet. She was looking for a missing link, and she found it in Australopithecus afarensis, which they then dated to 3.6 million years to fit their theory.
Gotcha. They just they twist things around until it fits, and then they go, okay, that'll work.
Well, and that's what they did, down in Mexico as well. This is secular scientist, a secular geologist, who found these footprints in Mexico, and she stuck by her story. She excavated them. And her name's Dr. Sylvia Gonzalez. She's a geoarchaeologist from Liverpool at John Moores University. And initially, they dated this with the optically stimulated luminescence scan, which is called an OSL scan, that measures, attempts to measure the sand grains in the rock and date it that way. And basically, they got roughly 40,000 years. Now, this, before this date, they had all accepted that these footprints were human. But when they got the 40,000 year date, it created a problem, because there's a battle over history, and supposedly that this whole theory that people, in the late Pleistocene to early Holocene, came through the Bering Land Strait, were the first hunter-gatherers who came from Asia some 11,000 years ago. Well, how can they account for a 40,000-year-old date of human fossil footprints in South America?
So they began to immediately start to rearrange.
So here's what they do. They said, no, that can't be right because we know, people didn't migrate back 40,000 years ago. It was between 11 and 13,500 years, so we got to redate it. So they redated it because it's going to mess up their whole Clovis theory.
Yeah.
Okay, that's called the Clovis theory, and the Clovis first model.
Yeah.
Of human occupation is being the the accepted model of the first evidence of human presence in the Americas. Now here's what they do: they redate it, and they got 1.3 million years. Now, here's two possibilities that you're left with. One is that they are really old hominids. I mean, old.
Yeah.
Or they're not footprints. See, they don't leave in the possibility that they're old in footprints or that they're young in footprints. It's either that they're really old footprints or they're not even footprints.
One of the shows that I'm going to be doing in the next coming months is going to be on worldview and how much your worldview will dictate the outcome of your research, because all it sounds like to me you're explaining is they're taking whatever they're finding, the facts, the truth, and they're just manipulating and twisting to fit a worldview that disagrees with the biblical account.
Well, they can get whatever date they want. You run those dates. They can get whatever date they want. They have to assume variables in it. The question is, the implication is that evolution is a fallacy and its theories and timelines are wrong.
Yeah.
Or secondly, Dave, that, greater confidence can be put in the Word of God, and specifically in the book of Genesis where God stated He created all living things in 6 days.
Yeah.
And, that's what it boils down to. These, there's other creation, X-Files. We got the iron hammer and stone. We got the iron cup.
I was going to say, let's do this. We only have a little bit of time to cover. I want to go 2 more points. One, take about 5 minutes and give us a quick rundown on the evidence of artwork that's been found within ancient civilizations that actually depict dinosaurs, and then why that's important.
Okay. Well, there's been a number of artwork depicting dinosaurs. One, matter of fact, was discovered in 2006 in a temple in Cambodia. It's an ancient temple, and this ancient temple basically had columns on this temple, and the columns depicted different animals and representations of birds and different mammals and whatnot. But on one of the animals, on one of the columns, was a bas relief of a stegosaur. Now, a stegosaur is a dinosaur that has these big frills going down the back of it, and it specifically has a stegosaur on this column. Now, how in the world...
Well, hold on. Before we get into the implication, what about, let's say, the Inca burial stones? The Inca burial stones? These are dinosaur art from the tombs in Peru that people from around Nazca drew these dinosaurs some 2,000 years ago. Their depictions include, specific representations of dinosaurs that are just now being found, that these depictions are actually true to the fossil account, such as iguanodon. Matter of fact, paleontologists didn't really realize if iguanodon stood up on its 2 feet or walked on all fours. Yeah.
But
the artwork actually answers that question.
And the artwork answers that question. These people saw living dinosaurs, and to depict them so accurately, on their tapestry, on their pottery.
You actually had some totem. I don't know if they were totem poles. I called them totem poles, but they were wood carvings. Wood
carvings
posts
on poles.
Yeah, that had them on there.
They're depicted, in all these various, formats, but it shows these dinosaurs.
All right, so let me ask you a question. When did archaeology really become a science?
Well,
I mean, generally speaking.
Well, basically, there's rough accounts on when archaeology started. Some say, it started back in 1798 when Napoleon went into Egypt and first found the Rosetta Stone.
Is that the earliest? Basically, the earliest account of when it. I'm just trying to establish. Let's just say 1700. Let's just go way beyond even the most liberal date and say 1700. These ancient civilizations that you're talking about are way older than that. Yes.
Oh yeah. So
the implication is basically
go anywhere from 500 AD up to 1500 AD.
So basically the implication is this: the question arises, how would they know what it looked like if archaeology was not a science, not a practiced science? Meaning people aren't going around and digging up bones, gluing them back together, and figuring out, having an artist rendition. How would these people know what they looked like unless, of course, they saw them?
Well, they didn't. Prior to 1841, Sir Richard Owens coined the term dinosaur. No one knew what a dinosaur was before 1841. This is, accounts of people seeing these creatures that we thought were extinct back, in these cultures, 500, AD to 1500 AD or so. These is, relatively,
And there's medieval times accounts of dragons and who was the Sir who fought the dragon? Big story.
St. George and the Dragon.
Yeah, St. George and the Dragon, and I mean, so there's even medieval accounts, and you can call them folklore, but it still gives the idea that people at one point were around. You can look at the Chinese culture and the amount of dragons that are all through their culture that acknowledge the fact that dragons existed and that people were with them and slew them.
We got these dinosaurs, figurines in Mexico. We got this art in Peru. We got dinosaur art by Native Americans. That I've personally gone and investigated.
So we've got footprints, we've got artwork, we've got tapestries, wood carvings,
that's right.
Clay figurines. Let me ask you about
fossilized hammer and stone.
Let me ask you about one really critical thing that I think you'll know what I'm talking about. I'm sure you do, because we've got about 3 minutes left.
Okay.
What about the red blood cells found within the T-Rex bone?
This is amazing, Dave, because Mary Schweitzer, back in 1997, cut open a dinosaur bone, and she saw, under electron microscope, soft tissue. And in that soft tissue was pliable, it was elastic, but she also verified red blood cells. Now, she repeated these tests over and over and over. She had other of her colleagues come and look at this. They repeated it. She did the whole scientific method. She repeated it, observed it, tested it, predicted, and they couldn't falsify it, is the bottom line. But the question remained, why is there fresh red blood cells and tissue, soft tissue, in dinosaur bone that's supposedly 60 million years old?
Yes,
it's not supposed to be there.
That's not logical to even a child.
They cannot account for it. So Mary Schweitzer, she stuck to her guns. She said, no, this is what I have. And the whole paleontology community was just astounded. Yeah. They couldn't believe it. But the more they realized the implications of what it meant, the more they realized that they could not keep to their story that they found red blood cells.
Yeah.
So after years of pressure, her own colleagues, the community in academia forced her to suppress the truth, and she basically recounted her story. She recanted her story.
But this was all well too documented. So
she didn't want to. It comes down to she didn't want to lose her job.
Destroy so much evidence.
You got a career staked on this stuff, and it happens to people all over. Just like your former guest last week.
Yeah.
It's very clear that if you go against the mainstream paradigm, and if you're in academia, you're not going to last very long because they don't want that evidence out.
That's right.
And if they let it out it's going to show people that dinosaurs maybe weren't around 60 million years, that maybe they were a lot more recent than that, because there shouldn't be any fresh red blood cells in those dinosaur bones.
Well, here
So it's huge implications.
I've always been what's known as a classical apologist. I believe in really just building your case from the ground up, and then evidential apologist, where I'm a big fan of providing evidences to show truth. But what I've kind of walked into over the past several years is turning into a cumulative case apologist. I'm kind of going to mix that in too, because what I'm hearing right now, whenever somebody asks me for a smoking gun, of course I feel like I have several of them, but what I tell them is when you hear the cumulative case, it's indisputable what it points towards. And so what we've heard on this show is there's fossil footprints, human footprints, not just in Glen Rose right next to dinosaur footprints, but across the globe in the same strata, there's human footprints. We have artwork that depicts dinosaurs next to humans, even dinosaurs fighting humans in some of these scenes, where you ask yourself the question, if they didn't see them for themselves, how would they have been able to accurately draw them? Even so much so that they're solving evolutionary problems, well, not evolutionary problems within secular science, to say, well, was it on all fours or upright in the artworks actually curing that? And then we have DNA evidence, or not DNA, red blood cell evidence within dinosaur bone, soft tissue, that flies in the face of long ages, because there's no way that soft tissue is going to survive. So when you put it all together, you've got footprints, artwork, and red blood cells. The cumulative case for that says to me that there is no doubt in my mind that dinosaurs and man once walked together. Aaron, thank you so much for being on the show. I may actually call you on at the beginning of next show just to clarify a few things. We're going to have Joe Taylor on next week talking about this very same subject. You've been listening to What is Truth Radio with Dave Glander on WIMO 1300. Have a great night.